Sometimes the loudest lessons in life come from the quietest places. In a small countryside house, George, a 72-year-old retired mechanic, spent his morning polishing his beloved old 1978 Chevrolet Impala. Its paint was faded, but to George, the car shone brighter than gold because it held decades of memories. As he worked, his 19-year-old grandson Ryan approached, phone in hand, dressed in the latest fashion, and full of youthful arrogance. With a mocking grin, Ryan pointed at the car and laughed. "Grandpa, are you seriously still wasting your time on this rust bucket? This thing belongs in a junkyard." George kept polishing, smiling softly. "Rust bucket, huh? Ryan, this car carried your father to college. Your grandmother and I went on our first road trip in it. These wheels hold stories you can't imagine." Ryan rolled his eyes and scoffed. "Stories? No one cares about stories anymore. People want horsepower, speed, style. You're living in the Stone Age. If my friends saw me in this, I'd die of embarrassment." George finally paused, setting down his cloth. He looked his grandson straight in the eyes, his voice calm but firm. "Embarrassment? A car isn't just steel and paint. It's memories, sacrifices, and journeys. One day, you'll understand." But Ryan only laughed louder. "The world doesn't run on memories, Grandpa. It runs on supercars. Flashy, loud, powerful. Like a Lamborghini or Ferrari. That's what makes someone a legend." George's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Legend, huh? Maybe I've been keeping a secret too long. Come with me." Curious now, Ryan followed, as George led him to a garage at the far end of the yard. The heavy lock clicked open, and the door creaked as it rose, letting in beams of sunlight. Dust floated in the air as Ryan squinted at the large cloth-covered shape inside. His excitement grew. "What's this? Don't tell me it's another ancient tractor." Without a word, George tugged the cover away. The cloth fell to the floor, revealing a gleaming red Lamborghini Aventador, its polished surface glowing under the dim light. Ryan gasped and stumbled back, his jaw dropping. "What? A Lamborghini? You had this all along?" George nodded calmly. "Yes, Ryan. I've had it for years." Ryan rushed forward, circling the car with wide eyes, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is insane! Grandpa, why would you hide this beauty? You could have been the coolest old man in town. Fame, respect, girls, this car is everything." George's expression turned serious, his voice steady. "That's where you're wrong, Ryan. This car isn't everything. Life's worth isn't measured by what you show off, but by what you stand for." Ryan hardly heard him. His eyes were glued, too, the sleek lines and glowing paint of the supercar. But George looked at his grandson with quiet sadness. He whispered to himself, "Maybe it's time to let this car teach you the lesson I couldn't." And so, what began as a mocking insult over an old car turned into the beginning of a plan that would shake Ryan's world. He thought he had just discovered treasure, but George was about to show him that the true lesson had only just begun. Ryan couldn't stop pacing around the Lamborghini, running his hand over its smooth red body. His eyes sparkled with excitement, as though he had just uncovered a hidden treasure chest. "Grandpa, you've been sitting on this beast all these years? You could have been famous. Why didn't you ever take it out, show it off, let people see you in this beauty?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. George leaned against the garage door, his arms crossed, watching his grandson with quiet eyes. "Because, Ryan, I never needed to prove anything to anyone. This car has been here for years, and not once did I feel the urge to drive it around just for people's approval." Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "That's crazy. You don't understand, Grandpa. With this car, you'd turn heads everywhere. People would respect you. Honestly, if this were mine, I'd never let it sit here and collect dust. George studied his grandson for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Is that so? You think this car is what brings respect? You think people should value you because of what you own, not who you are? Ryan shrugged casually. Well, that's how the world works now. People admire success, power, money, luxury. No one cares about old stories or faded memories anymore. George let out a deep sigh, walking slowly toward the Lamborghini. He placed his hand on its hood, his fingers brushing the cool metal. Ryan, I kept this car hidden because I didn't want it to change me, or anyone else in this family. But maybe it's time I let it go. Ryan froze, staring at his grandfather. Let it go? What do you mean? You can't just give up a Lamborghini, Grandpa! That's insane! George's eyes glinted with determination. Sometimes the best way to teach someone a lesson is not through words, but through actions. You mocked my old car, laughed at my memories, and worshipped what you think makes someone valuable. So maybe it's time to show you what really matters. Ryan frowned, confused but curious. What are you saying? George looked at him with a calm smile. I've decided to give this car away. Ryan's jaw dropped. What? No, no, no. You can't be serious. You're joking, right? Grandpa? Come on, you can't just give it away. If you don't want it, then let me have it. But George shook his head. No, Ryan. This car isn't meant to feed arrogance. It's meant to teach humility. And if I gave it to you now, you'd only fall deeper into pride. That's not the lesson you need. Ryan's face turned red with anger. So, what? You're going to just hand it over to some random stranger? That's ridiculous. You'd throw away a fortune just to prove a point. George's voice grew firm. Ryan, listen carefully. A man's worth is not in the car he drives, the clothes he wears, or the money in his pocket. It's in his character, his kindness, and his respect for others. This car is just a tool, and I will use it to teach, not to boast. Ryan stormed out of the garage, his fists clenched. This is insane. You'll regret this, Grandpa. One day, you'll realize how foolish it is to give up something so valuable. George watched him leave, sadness in his eyes, but also a quiet strength. He whispered under his breath, No, Ryan. One day, you will realize. That evening, George sat alone at the kitchen table, sipping his tea. The decision weighed heavy on him, but he knew it was the right one. He had made up his mind. The Lamborghini would not remain in that garage any longer. Tomorrow, it would belong to someone else. And with it, he hoped to pass on the lesson Ryan desperately needed to learn. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the countryside house. George stood quietly in the driveway, keys to the Lamborghini resting in his hand. Ryan had barely spoken to him since their argument, his pride still stung by his grandfather's decision. But George's mind was made up. Today, the car would no longer sit in that garage. Soon, a young man named Daniel arrived. He was in his late 20s, wearing simple clothes that were patched and faded. His shoes were worn out, and his bicycle leaned against the fence. Daniel often helped neighbors, fix small engines, and worked odd jobs to support his struggling family. George had watched him for years, admiring his honesty and hard work. Ryan, noticing the stranger, frowned. Who's this guy, Grandpa? Don't tell me you're calling a mechanic for the Lambo. George smiled calmly. No, Ryan. This is Daniel. And today, he'll be the one taking the Lamborghini. Ryan's jaw nearly hit the ground. What? You're giving him the car? A nobody? Grandpa, this is insane. He doesn't deserve it. He probably doesn't even know how to drive it. Daniel looked shocked, raising his hands. Mr. George, I can't accept this. This car is worth more than anything I could ever dream of. Why would you give it to me? George placed the keys gently into Daniel's trembling hands. Because you've worked hard without ever asking for recognition. You've lived with dignity, honesty, and humility. Those are the qualities that make a man truly wealthy. This car will serve you better than it ever served me. Ryan exploded in anger. So, all those years you kept this hidden, all that time, and you're just handing it over to him? To prove a point to me? His voice cracked with disbelief. Grandpa, you're throwing away millions. George turned to Ryan, his eyes filled with both sorrow and strength. Yes, Ryan, I am giving away millions. But if it helps you see that pride and arrogance mean nothing without respect, then it's worth more than any price tag. Daniel, still stunned, nodded slowly. I will take care of it, sir. Not for show, not for pride, but because it will help me build something better for my family. I promise you that. Ryan shook his head furiously, pacing in circles. This is ridiculous. Do you even realize what you're doing? Everyone will think you've lost your mind. George placed a hand gently on his grandson's shoulder. Let them think what they want. A man doesn't live by the opinions of the crowd, Ryan. He lives by the strength of his heart. Daniel drove the car away, the powerful engine roaring down the road. Ryan stood frozen, watching the Lamborghini disappear into the distance. His chest tightened with anger, disappointment, and a strange feeling he couldn't quite describe. Something that felt almost like shame. That evening, Ryan sat silently at the dinner table, avoiding his grandfather's gaze. For the first time, his confidence wavered. The Lamborghini was gone, but in its absence, something far heavier hung in the air. A lesson Ryan couldn't ignore forever. That night, Ryan lay awake in his room, replaying the moment in his mind. The roar of the Lamborghini's engine echoed in his ears, but instead of excitement, it brought him an ache he couldn't shake. For the first time. That night, Ryan lay awake in his room, replaying the moment in his mind. The roar of the Lamborghini's engine echoed in his ears, but instead of excitement, it brought him an ache he couldn't shake. For the first time, he began to question himself. Was his grandfather right? Was life really more than wealth and status? The next morning, Ryan found George sitting on the porch, sipping his tea as the sunrise painted the sky. The old Impala was parked nearby, its worn surface gleaming faintly in the light. Ryan hesitated before stepping closer. "Grandpa," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I don't get it. You gave away the most valuable thing you had, and you're just sitting here, calm as ever. Don't you regret it?" George smiled, setting his cup down. "No, Ryan, because the most valuable thing I have is sitting right in front of me. You. And if giving away a car helps open your eyes, then it was worth more than keeping it locked away." Ryan's throat tightened. He lowered his gaze, embarrassed. I guess I was wrong. I thought respect and admiration came from shiny cars and expensive things. But Daniel, he didn't even ask for it. And you saw more in him than I ever did." George nodded gently. "True respect comes from character, not possessions. Look at this old Impala. To the world, it's just a piece of junk. But to me, it's priceless because of the memories it carries. Someday, When you understand that, you'll stop chasing approval and start valuing what really matters. Ryan walked over to the Impala, running his fingers along its weathered body. For the first time, he didn't see rust. He saw the care his grandfather had poured into it, the history it carried, the love it represented. Turning back, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandpa, for mocking it, for mocking you." George's eyes softened. He stood and embraced his grandson, his voice warm. "I don't need your apology, Ryan. I only need to know you've learned something." A quiet peace settled over them as the morning sun rose higher. The Lamborghini was gone, but its absence had given Ryan a gift far more lasting than horsepower or speed. A new understanding of respect, humility, and family. As they stood together by the old car, Ryan finally saw what his grandfather had always known. Life's greatest treasures aren't parked in garages or displayed for the world to admire. They live in the bonds we share, the memories we keep, and the love we pass on.